Hello everyone, this is Tom, and today I'm going to talk about sampling in qualitative research. So before I get started to talk about sampling, I want to ask you a very simple question. If you want to know that how many courses are taken by our students each semester in your program, what are you going to do? So if there are only 7 students in your program, it's very easy, right? You just ask them this question, and they will give you the answer directly. What if you want to change this question into how many courses taken by our students this semester in the United States? That's going to be different, right? So it's time consuming. It's impossible for you to ask everybody this question. What are you going to do? So that's why we need sampling, right? You need sampling to extract representative participants from the target population. At the same time, you can ensure the findings, conclusions are generalizable or transferable. All right, so you don't have to interview everybody with sampling, and you just need to extract the representatives, right, from the large population and ask them, and then the findings can be applicable to or generalizable or transferable to the population. But there is a difference between generalizability and transferability, and we'll talk more about that later on. But here is the general sampling process for qualitative research. Okay, so after you have a clear research question in your mind or develop your conceptual framework, you should define, you can define your target population. Who will tell you the answer to your research question, right? Who can give you the important information? And also, you try to look for the research sites and where you can find them, right? And then you contact them, you get access to the research site, and then after you interact with them, you kind of like have a sampling strategy in your mind, how you can get the data you want, right? Who will become your potential participants? And you start your data collection. And in this process, you are also trying to map out all the characteristics of the research participants and also your research questions. And not research question, but a research context. Because before you get into it, you have idealized the population characteristic in your mind, right? But it's not true. But once you get there, you realize, the characteristic of the participants are not exactly what I consider it to be. You may need to adjust your strategy, or you may need to clarify the characteristics of your participants, or maybe you need to change the people you want to interview with. The thing is, so as to you want to get the data that can answer your research question. Okay. So this is just a general sampling process for qualitative research, but not everybody follow this process. Okay, because of different strategies over there, they may choose different sampling process. So in general, sampling strategies can be divided into 2 types. The first type is called probability sampling, which is relied on statistics and or which is called probability theory. Okay, so there's some strategies like random sampling and a stratified sampling strategy, and a cluster sampling. We'll introduce each one later on. And for purposeful sampling, it's different from the probability sampling. Purposeful sampling is based on your research interest. You're trying to look for people that match with your research goal, where the people can answer your research question. So there are different types of purposeful sampling, and same to the probability sampling, we will introduce them. All right, so the first strategy is called a random sampling. What it look like? The first, you need to label the participants you have by numbers, and then based on certain type of random numbers or random number tables, or using some other technique, you generate some random numbers, and those random number will determine this, who will become your participants. Right? To me, it's like a lottery process. Everybody got equal chances to be selected, okay, to win. Right? So, but you cannot decide who will become your participants, and those numbers will decide for you. And so this is kind of like a reduce your researchers' bias. Yeah, so that's why it's the conclusion or the result is very generalizable. Okay. Another probability sampling is called stratified sampling or cluster sampling, which is very similar to random sampling. But after you label each student by numbers, you want to divide them into different groups based on certain standard. Like, for me, I can see, oh, in the classroom, my students, some students are motivated, some more students are not motivated. I can divide them into two groups. So based on that, and I randomly choose participants from each group. So it's kind of like a random sampling, but before random sampling, you need to divide them into groups, clusters, or stratus. Okay. So another type of sampling is called purposeful sampling. So basically, like I mentioned before, you choose the participants by a certain standard, or either your research interest or something else. So the first sampling strategies I want to introduce with is criteria-based sampling. This is type of purposeful sampling. Basically, the first thing you need to do is you need to describe the characteristic of your attributes of the participants you want to investigate with, based on your research question, based on your research conceptual framework. And then based on this standard, you try to look for people that match with this standard. Okay. So this is very simple to understand. And another purposeful sampling is called network sampling or snowball sampling. Network sampling is very easy to understand. Sometimes it's very hard for you to find a group of people to interview with. What are you gonna do? You're gonna find one people that you probably believe that he or she will tell you a lot of important information, and then you ask after you interview him or her, you ask them, hey, do you have any friends who you believe will give me some other important information? And then he or she will recommend you to those people, and you start getting more participants. All right. So it's the same thing for snowball sampling. You interview this person recommend to you another person. And it's like a snowball, right? So purposeful sampling. Another purposeful sampling is called extreme case sampling. This is usually conducted after you got your main data and analyze the data, and then you realize, oh, there's a person, his perspective is so unique that I want to know more about him or her. So you use this sampling strategy. Okay. Another strategy, which is called theoretical sampling strategy, is very similar to extreme case sampling strategy, because it's used after the data analysis. Okay. After data analysis, after you coding the data, you realize, oh, there's some interesting things over there. There's some theoretical things or some interesting constructs over in the data that you as a researcher may well believe that those things will become a new theory or make a contribution to the theoretical development. So, and then you decided to look for people that may confirm, may tell you the information that verify your assumptions. Okay, so the sampling, the criteria for sampling is based on the theory you found. So this is the theory or constructs you find in the data analysis process. So this is widely used by grounding theory researchers because they want to contribute to theory or propose their own theory. So Anyway, probability sampling and purposive sampling, they are different, and each one has its advantage and disadvantage. Probability sampling, as we mentioned earlier, it can ensure the generability of the results. But purposeful sampling is very effective in investigating unknown or heterogeneous situations of extreme small or wide populations, because sometimes you don't know uh, whether this group of people is exactly what you want, but you can like have a standard in your mind. You go there, interview them to decide whether they match with your standard or not. And so each one has pros and cons. It depends on you how to use them. So, but as specifically, people use different, those different type of sampling strategies. They view the sampling process differently. For instance, for random sampling strategies, most positivists would like to use this, and they review the sampling process as static, a linear process. After they done the data collection, they feel it's done. The data collection is over, and they started data analysis. But for ethnographers, they view the sampling process as interactive, developmental process, as a dynamic process. So although they have a plan in their mind, but when they get to the research sites, they may decide to change their plan. They realize, oh, these participants are not fit with my standard or criteria, or I may need to adjust my sampling strategies or adjust my research questions probably. So it's a dynamic process. I think ethnographers are very flexible. That's why, because a lot of research they focused on exploratory research. So that's why you need different kind of like type of sampling strategy to help you with. But so, and also there another difference is formal inferences or informal inferences. So random sampling, most positivists will like to use this sampling strategy because they believe that with the power of statistic or probability theory, the findings, there's results of the study can be generalized to entire population. So they prefer generability of their results. But for ethnographers, they choose purposeful sampling. They are not relying on statistics that much. Most of them rely on their research interest, and also they use different types. They prefer different sources of data, like observation, like documentation, an interview, and over a long time period. Okay. So, and their goal is not to generalize their results to the entire population. They just want to generalize the transfer to that group. Okay, they focus on that group. You try to clarify their logic, which is called informal inference. Their logic, they try to make it clear. They try to make the context clear and the participants clear, so as to make sure their findings can be transferable to another research. So anyway, which one do you prefer? Maybe you can combine them together. Maybe you can use purposeful sampling first and then random sampling later. Uh, yeah, this is the I believe there's a way to combine them together, but I'm not sure. So what do you think? So that's my question for you to think about. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the class. Bye.